Hi, this is Lane 8492. This will be my only true crime story video I'm doing today. This one is another case which was up in the panhandle of northern Florida. This is the case of Florida death row inmate Edward John Zakrzewski II. You see, Edward John Zakrzewski II, he wasn't doing too well in college and felt it wasn't for him, so he ended up dropping out, and then as a result, he ended up joining the United States Air Force. And while he was stationed in Idaho, he ended up meeting a woman named Sylvia who was from South Korea. He was then eventually assigned to South Korea in the Air Force. And of course, Sylvia Zakrzewski was happy because she could be near her family. But then eventually, Edward John Zakrzewski and of course, they had two kids named Edward John Zakrzewski III and Anna Zakrzewski. And then eventually, Edward John Zakrzewski II would be stationed at Eglin Air Force Base in Fort Walton Beach in the panhandle of northern Florida. And she wanted Sylvia wanted Edward to go to college so he could become a U.S. ambassador to South Korea, so Sylvia could be near her family. But then they were but apparently that didn't that didn't get to happen, and they ended up starting having marital problems to where Sylvia Zakrzewski decided she was going to file for divorce from Edward. And of course, while Edward John Zakrzewski II was on his lunch break, he ended up going to buy a machete. And then after his shift at Eglin Air Force Base was done for the day, where he was a technical sergeant in the Air Force, after an argument, Edward John Zakrzewski II took a crowbar and bludgeoned his wife, Sylvia Zakrzewski. He then lured his 7-year-old son, Edward John Zakrzewski III, to the bathroom, where he attacked him and unalived him with a machete. And then Edward John Zakrzewski II lured his 5-year-old daughter, Anna Zakrzewski, to where he attacked her with a machete, and then he attacked his dead body's wife with a machete. This is not the first and last case of maniacs who end up massacring their whole family. I mean, many can't forget the case of Christopher Watts, who ended up massacring his whole family, his pregnant wife, Shanann Watts, and their 2 daughters. And of course, Edward John Zakrzewski II is no different. And of course, he's been on death row since 1996 for 29 years. And now, Governor Ronald Dion DeSantis has signed a date of execution for Edward John Zakrzewski II on July 31st, which will be 16 days after Florida executes Michael Bernard Bell, who I previously did a true crime story video on. Now, if the execution of Edward John Zakrzewski II is carried out, this will be the 9th execution carried out in Florida this year, which means Florida is on course to break records, because the most executions Florida has ever carried out in a year at most is 8. So far, 7 prisoners have been executed this year in Florida. They were James Dennis Ford, Edward Thomas James, Michael Anthony Tanzi, let me start again. The 7 they've executed this year in Florida were James Dennis Ford, Edward Thomas James, Michael Anthony Tanzi, Jeffrey Glenn Hutchinson, Glenn Edward Rogers, Anthony Floyd Wainwright, and Thomas Lee Gudinas. And of course, the execution of Michael Bernard Bell will be the 8th this year in Florida, and then Edward John Zakrzewski II will be the 9th. Well, hope you enjoy this video and let me know what you think. Thanks.